Why is it that we can love someone deeply and still feel insecure? Why do we promise to communicate better and yet shut down when it matters most? Why does jealousy rise in our chest even when we don't want it to? Most relationship struggles are not about love. They are about nervous systems. Two people don't just come together with chemistry, they come together with history, with attachment wounds, with survival strategies that once protected them but now create distance. If you want to build trust, improve communication, and handle jealousy in a relationship, you don't start by controlling your partner. You start by understanding what is happening inside you. Trust is not built by promises, it is built by safety. And safety is not a concept, it is a biological experience. When your nervous system feels safe, you relax, you soften, you become open. When it feels threatened, you defend, attack, withdraw, or cling. Many people think trust is about proving loyalty. But deeper than that, trust grows when your partner is emotionally consistent, when their words match their actions, when conflict does not threaten abandonment. If love was inconsistent in your early life, warm one day, distant the next, your system learned to scan for danger. That scanning often shows up as jealousy. Jealousy is rarely about the third person. It is about the fear of losing connection. And that fear often began long before your current partner. Instead of shaming jealousy, become curious about it. Ask, what am I afraid of right now? Is this about the present, or is something older being activated? When jealousy is met with compassion instead of judgment, it softens. Now let's talk about communication. Most communication problems are not about words, they are about regulation. If one partner feels overwhelmed, they shut down. If the other feels unheard, they escalate. Both are protection. Improving communication is not about saying the perfect sentence. It is about staying emotionally present while discomfort is happening. That means learning to pause instead of react, to say, I'm feeling triggered, I need a moment. To speak from vulnerability rather than accusation. Instead of, you never care about me, try, when I don't hear from you, I feel anxious and unimportant. One invites defense, the other invites understanding. Trust grows when vulnerability is met with responsiveness. And here is something many people miss. You cannot build trust while abandoning yourself. If you silence your needs to keep peace, resentment will replace intimacy. If you avoid difficult conversations to avoid conflict, distance will quietly grow. Healthy love requires two whole people, not two survival patterns negotiating fear. Handling jealousy also requires responsibility, not self-blame, but ownership. It is not your partner's job to erase every insecurity. It is their job to be respectful and transparent. But healing the root of jealousy, that work is internal. Ask yourself, do I believe I am worthy of love? Or do I trust myself to survive loss? Or am I seeking reassurance because I lack information or because I lack inner safety? When you build inner security, external triggers lose power. And finally, remember this, trust is built in small moments. When someone listens instead of dismisses. When they repair after conflict instead of pretending nothing happened. When they stay consistent even when emotions are high. Relationships do not fail because of jealousy alone. They fail when fear is never spoken, when needs are never expressed, when vulnerability is punished instead of protected. Love is not just passion, it is emotional responsibility. And the more you understand your own wounds, the less you project them onto the person you love. That is where trust truly begins. Let me tell you 5 important things that are to be well TRSTIMPRO communication and ALJLOUSY. First thing is that safety builds trust, not promises. Trust is not built in grand gestures. It is not built in dramatic apologies, passionate declarations, or long messages promising change. Trust is built in repetition. It is built when someone says they will call, and they call. When they say they will show up, and they show up. When they say they care, and their behavior reflects it, not once, but consistently, because the body does not trust words. The nervous system trusts patterns. If you grew up in an environment where love was unpredictable, warm one moment, distant the next, your system learned vigilance. It learned to scan faces, tones, pauses. It learned to anticipate withdrawal. It learned that connection could disappear without warning. So in adulthood, when someone makes a promise, part of you may want to believe them, but another part waits for the shift, the silence, the disappointment. That waiting is not weakness, it is adaptation. The nervous system is not interested in poetry. It is interested in survival. Safety begins when your body no longer has to brace. When affection does not suddenly turn into coldness. When conflict does not threaten abandonment. When your vulnerability is not used against you later. Emotional consistency regulates the system in ways logic never can. If someone is kind one day and dismissive the next, your body cannot relax. It stays alert. It becomes hyper-aware. That hyper-awareness often gets mislabeled as overthinking or jealousy. But in truth, it is a nervous system trying to detect danger early. Reliability tells the body, you do not need to prepare for loss right now. And when the body feels safe, something remarkable happens. You soften, you communicate more openly, you assume less hostility, you become less reactive. Trust is not a decision you make once. It is a state your nervous system enters gradually. And that state develops when there is coherence, when words, tone, behavior, and intention align over time. It also develops when there is repair. Consistency does not mean perfection. It means accountability. It means that when harm happens, and there is acknowledgement instead of denial, repair instead of defensiveness. A nervous system does not expect flawlessness. It expects responsiveness. When someone says, I see that I hurt you. That wasn't my intention, but I understand the impact. The body registers safety. It registers that rupture does not equal rejection. Many people believe trust requires controlling outcomes, monitoring, testing, seeking constant reassurance. But the deeper truth is this: when safety is present, control becomes unnecessary. You do not need to grip what feels stable. Safety also requires something internal. If you do not feel safe within yourself, if you abandon your own boundaries, silence your discomfort, or override your intuition, no amount of external promises will soothe you, because the nervous system notices when you betray yourself. Building trust in a relationship, therefore, has two layers: consistency from the other person, integrity within yourself. When both are present, the body begins to rest. And when the body rests, love can expand. Without safety, love feels like anxiety. With safety, love feels like home. Second important thing is jealousy is often old attachment fear. Jealousy rarely begins in the present moment. It may look like it does. It may be triggered by something small, a tone of voice, a delayed reply, a glance that lingers a little too long. But what rises inside you is often much older than the event itself. Jealousy is frequently the nervous system remembering a time when connection felt uncertain, when love felt unpredictable, when attention was inconsistent, when closeness could disappear without explanation. As children, we are not thinking in words, we are learning in sensations. If the people we depended on were emotionally unavailable, distracted, overwhelmed, or inconsistent, our system absorbed a message. Closeness is not stable, and from that message, vigilance was born. Jealousy then is not weakness. It is vigilance shaped by history. It is the body trying to prevent a loss it has already known. That is why jealousy can feel disproportionate. The intensity does not always match the situation, because you are not reacting only to what is happening, you are reacting to what once happened. When jealousy appears, many people turn against themselves. I'm too insecure, I'm crazy, I'm toxic, or they turn against their partner. You're disrespectful, you're hiding something, you don't care about me. But both reactions miss the deeper truth. Jealousy is not a moral failure. It is an alarm system. The problem is not the alarm. The problem is when we treat the alarm as evidence instead of information. Responding with curiosity changes everything. Curiosity slows the reaction and asks, gently, what is this feeling protecting? What am I afraid might happen? When have I felt this before? You may discover that beneath jealousy is a fear of being replaced, a fear of not being enough, a fear of abandonment, a fear of invisibility. And those fears are rarely born in adulthood. Self-awareness means recognizing that your partner may not be the original source of this pain. They may simply be activating it. This realization does not invalidate your feelings. It contextualizes them. Instead of saying, you made me feel this way, you begin to say, something inside me was already tender. That shift removes blame and opens dialogue. When jealousy is met with shame, it hardens. When it is met with accusation, it escalates. When it is met with curiosity, it softens. Curiosity allows you to pause before speaking. It allows you to regulate before reacting. It allows you to differentiate between intuition and fear. If your partner is crossing clear boundaries, hiding information, or being dishonest, your discomfort may be protective wisdom. But if the reaction feels sudden, overwhelming, or rooted in imagined scenarios, it may be attachment fear asking for reassurance. Self-awareness also means taking responsibility for your healing. It is not your partner's job to erase every insecurity. It is their responsibility to behave with integrity and respect. But the deeper work, the work of soothing the old wound, belongs to you. You begin to build internal security. You remind yourself that your worth is not diminished by someone else's presence. You remind yourself that love is not a competition. You remind yourself that you are not a child waiting to be chosen. You are an adult capable of surviving disappointment. And when you speak from that grounded place, the conversation changes. Instead of accusation, there is vulnerability. Instead of interrogation, there is honesty. You might say, "When that happened, I noticed I felt afraid. I know this may be connected to my past, but I want to share it rather than act it out." That kind of expression builds intimacy rather than distance. Jealousy, when handled with awareness, becomes an invitation not to control the other person, but to understand yourself more deeply. Because at its core, jealousy is a longing to feel secure, a longing to feel chosen, a longing to feel safe in love. And when that longing is acknowledged instead of attacked, it loses its urgency. What remains is something much more honesty, the desire to connect without fear. That is where healing begins. Third is regulation improves communication. Communication does not break down because people lack vocabulary. It breaks down because their nervous systems are overwhelmed. When you feel criticized, dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood, your body reacts before your mind has time to interpret. The heart rate shifts, the muscles tighten, the breath shortens. In that moment, you are no longer simply having a conversation, you are defending yourself from perceived threat. And once the body enters survival mode, communication changes shape. Some people fight, some people shut down, some people become sarcastic, some people become silent. None of these are signs of cruelty, they are signs of activation. When the nervous system senses danger, even emotional danger, it prepares to protect. The problem is that protection and connection rarely look the same. If you want communication to improve, the first skill is not persuasion. It is regulation. Regulation means staying present with discomfort long enough to respond rather than react. It means noticing the surge of anger without letting it drive your words. It means feeling hurt without immediately turning it into blame. It means sensing the urge to withdraw and choosing instead to stay engaged, even if only partially. This is difficult because discomfort feels urgent. It wants relief, and the quickest relief often comes from discharge, snapping back, shutting down, proving a point. But discharge is not repair. When you react from survival mode, you are no longer listening. You are scanning, you are defending, you are protecting your identity. Regulation allows something else to happen. It creates a pause, and in that pause you can ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Is this anger or is it hurt? Is this frustration or is it fear? Am I trying to win or am I trying to be understood? That pause is not weakness. It is maturity. Staying present with discomfort does not mean tolerating disrespect. It means tolerating emotion without being ruled by it. You can say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need a minute. You can say, I want to talk about this, but I need to calm down first. You can say, when you said that, it hurt me. These are regulated responses. They keep you in connection without escalating threat. When one partner regulates, it often helps regulate the other. Nervous systems are relational. Calm can be contagious, just as anxiety can be contagious. If both people are activated, the conversation becomes a collision of defenses. If at least one person slows down, the tone shifts. Regulation also requires compassion for yourself. You may not have learned emotional regulation growing up. If conflict in your early life meant chaos, withdrawal, or punishment, your body learned to brace. So when your partner raises their voice or challenges you, your reaction may be rooted in history, not hostility. Recognizing that allows you to soften toward yourself instead of feeling ashamed for being too sensitive or too reactive. The goal is not to eliminate emotion. Emotion carries truth. The goal is to feel it without letting it control your behavior, because communication improves when people feel safe enough to reveal what is underneath the reaction. Under anger, there is often hurt. Under defensiveness, there is often shame. Under withdrawal, there is often fear of not being enough. Regulation gives you access to those deeper layers. And when you speak from those layers instead of from protection, connection deepens. You move from, "You never listen," to, "I feel alone when I don't feel heard." You move from, "Whatever, forget it," to, "This matters to me, and I'm afraid it won't matter to you." That shift transforms conversations. Regulation does not make conflict disappear. It makes conflict productive. It allows disagreement without destruction. It allows emotion without escalation. It allows honesty without attack. And over time, when both partners experience that safety repeatedly, trust grows. Because the nervous system begins to learn we can feel uncomfortable and still stay connected. That is the foundation of mature communication. Not perfection, not constant harmony, but the ability to stay present with discomfort and choose connection over survival. Another thing is that vulnerability invites connection. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. Many people believe vulnerability means exposing weakness, surrendering power, or risking humiliation. So instead of revealing what they truly feel, they protect themselves with certainty, with criticism, with control. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is emotional honesty without armor. When you say, "You always ignore me," what you are often trying to say is, "I feel invisible." When you say, "You never care," what you may really mean is, "I'm afraid I don't matter." When you say, "You don't love me the way I need," what may live underneath is, "I feel alone." Blame is often pain in disguise. The problem is that blame activates defense. The moment someone hears "you always" or "you never," their nervous system shifts into protection. They stop listening to your pain and start defending their character. And once defense enters the room, connection leaves. Vulnerability, on the other hand, lowers threat. When you say, "I feel hurt," you are not attacking. When you say, "I feel anxious when we don't talk," you are not accusing. When you say, "I feel scared of losing you," you are not controlling, you are revealing your inner world. And when someone is invited into your inner world rather than pushed into a corner, something softens. Vulnerability creates the possibility of empathy. It allows the other person to respond to your humanity instead of your hostility. But speaking vulnerably requires courage because it exposes need. Many of us were taught that needing is dangerous, that asking is burdensome, that emotions are excessive. So we learn to protect our needs with anger or silence. Anger feels powerful. Silence feels safe, but neither creates intimacy. Intimacy grows when two people are willing to be seen without performance. When you say, "I feel," you take responsibility for your experience. You are not assigning motive. You are not rewriting the other person's intentions. You are simply sharing your internal state. I feel unimportant when plans change last minute. I feel anxious when I don't know what's happening. I feel distant when we don't talk about hard things. These statements do not demand. They invite. They say, "Here is what is happening inside me." And when that sharing is met with care instead of dismissal, trust deepens. It is important to understand that vulnerability does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. It does not mean suppressing boundaries. You can be vulnerable and firm at the same time. For example, "I feel hurt when you speak to me that way. I need us to talk respectfully." There is no accusation in that sentence. There is clarity and self-respect. Vulnerability also means staying with your feelings long enough to identify them accurately. Many people jump straight to anger because anger is easier than sadness or fear. But if you slow down and ask yourself what you are truly feeling, you may discover something more tender. Maybe you feel rejected. Maybe you feel insecure. Maybe you feel unseen. And when you name those feelings honestly, you create the possibility for closeness rather than conflict. The paradox is this: the more you protect yourself from vulnerability, the more disconnected you feel. The more you allow yourself to be seen, the more secure you become. Because intimacy is not built on perfection. It is built on authenticity. When both partners practice speaking from "I feel," conversations shift from combat to collaboration. Instead of proving who is right, you begin to explore what is real. And over time, the nervous system learns that expressing emotion does not lead to punishment. That being honest does not lead to abandonment. That is how safety grows. Vulnerability does not guarantee the other person will respond perfectly. but it gives the relationship its best chance at depth. Blame closes doors, honest feeling opens them, and connection can only grow where doors are open. And last thing you should know, that inner security reduces relational anxiety. Relational anxiety often feels like it is about the other person. It feels like it is about what they might do, who they might choose, how they might change, whether they might leave. But beneath that anxiety is a quieter, more personal question. Do I trust myself if something goes wrong? When inner security is fragile, relationships become a place of constant monitoring. You analyze tone, you measure response time, you search for subtle shifts in behavior, you try to anticipate danger before it arrives. Control becomes a strategy for calming fear. If I can predict you, I can relax. If I can manage you, I can feel safe. If I can prevent you from leaving, I won't be hurt. But control never truly creates safety. It creates temporary relief, because the anxiety is not only about the partner. It is about your capacity to handle loss, rejection, or disappointment. Inner security is not the belief that nothing bad will happen. It is the belief that if something does happen, you will not collapse. It is the quiet confidence that you can survive discomfort, that you can tolerate uncertainty, that you will not abandon yourself in the process. When inner security is strong, love feels like connection, not like surveillance. You do not need to check constantly because your nervous system is not bracing for impact. You do not need to control because your sense of worth is not dependent on constant reassurance. This kind of security does not come from arrogance or detachment. It comes from self-trust. Self-trust means listening to your intuition. It means honoring your boundaries. It means knowing that if someone violates your values, you will respond, not ignore it. When you trust yourself, you do not need to grip the relationship tightly. You know you can walk away if necessary. And paradoxically, that freedom allows you to stay more fully present. Relational anxiety often decreases when you stop outsourcing your sense of stability. If your self-worth depends entirely on being chosen, then every perceived threat feels catastrophic. But if you know your worth exists independently of another person's attention, jealousy softens. You begin to think, not from fear, but from clarity. If this relationship continues, I can love. If it ends, I can grieve and still be whole. That mindset changes the entire emotional tone of connection. You stop trying to manage your partner's behavior and start focusing on your own alignment. Instead of asking, how do I make sure they never leave? You begin asking, am I being true to myself in this relationship? Inner security grows when you act in accordance with your values, even when it is uncomfortable. When you say no instead of pretending. When you speak up instead of silencing yourself. When you walk away from disrespect instead of tolerating it out of fear. Every time you honor yourself, your nervous system learns something powerful. I am safe with me. And when you feel safe with yourself, your partner no longer carries the full burden of your stability. You can love without clinging. You can trust without obsessing. You can care deeply without losing yourself. Inner security does not remove vulnerability. It strengthens it. Because when you trust yourself, you can open your heart without constantly scanning for betrayal. You are not naive, you are grounded. You understand that relationships involve risk. But you also understand that your identity is not at risk. The more secure you feel within, the less you need to control without. And control is often just anxiety searching for certainty. But certainty in relationships is never absolute. What is possible, however, is resilience. When you cultivate inner security, you no longer try to manage love through fear. You allow it to unfold through trust. Not just trust in the other person, but trust in your own capacity to navigate whatever arises. And that is where relational anxiety begins to loosen its grip. Not because the world becomes predictable, but because you become steady. Love does not ask you to become fearless. It asks you to become aware, to notice when your old wounds are speaking louder than the present moment, to recognize when your nervous system is protecting you from a past that is no longer happening, to choose curiosity over accusation, presence over panic, honesty over control. Trust is not built in intensity, it is built in consistency. Communication is not improved by winning, it is improved by staying regulated. Jealousy is not healed by shame, it is healed by understanding. And inner security is not about needing no one. It is about knowing you will not abandon yourself in the process of loving someone. When two people can say, I feel, instead of you always, something shifts. When they can pause instead of react, something softens. When they can take responsibility for their triggers instead of projecting them, something matures. Healthy relationships are not free of fear. They are relationships where fear can be spoken without punishment, where vulnerability is met with care, where mistakes are repaired, where both people are willing to look inward as much as they look outward. The goal is not perfection. The goal is safety. And when safety grows, trust follows. When trust follows, control relaxes. When control relaxes, love can breathe. And perhaps that is what real intimacy is. Not the absence of insecurity, but the courage to face it together without losing yourself.